may even help you find some answers, or, even better, inspire you to ask new questions. In the first chapter, Hill tells the story of R.U. Darby, who learned a very costly lesson that changed him for the rest of his life. Darby did what many people do. He quit when he felt overtaken by temporary defeat. Napoleon Hill knew that every one of us is guilty of this mistake at one time or another. Greg vaguely remembered something about the story from his brief look at the book. Now he pulled himself upright to write in his notepad. The most common cause of failure is quitting. Pleased to see his visitor taking notes, Green continued. Darby's uncle had been struck by gold fever. He traveled west to get rich in the mining business. This would-be prospector had many more hopes than solutions, you see, because he had not invested the time to learn how to do what he wanted to accomplish. He just wanted to find gold. He had not studied mining or learned from others about the proper way to mine or even the travails of mining. He simply staked a claim and went to work with his pick and shovel. Greg sat quietly, consuming every word of the story. He realized, to his surprise, that his usual internal dialogue of self-absorbed chatter had abated to a great degree. He was not thinking of Mia or David or his business worries or any other problem. Instead, he was really listening. Fortunately, after weeks of manual labor, Darby's uncle was rewarded with the discovery of gold, and lots of it. While it was a good problem to have, he quickly realized that he really wasn't prepared. He needed machinery to remove the enormous amount of heavy rocks and dirt that covered the shining ore. Understanding that machinery cost money that he didn't have, he carefully covered up the mine and traveled back to his home in Williamsburg, Maryland. He loudly proclaimed his great discovery and boasted of the tremendous wealth of gold that lay in the ground just waiting for his return. It didn't take long to persuade his family and friends to invest toward the needed equipment. With money in hand, Darby's uncle invited his young protege to return with him to start digging for the promised treasure. When the first gold ore was retrieved, they excitedly shipped it to the smelter. Sure enough, it was high-quality ore and promised to be one of the richest gold discoveries in Colorado. In just a few more loads, and they would not only be able to repay their debts to their family and friends, but would have plenty of money to spare. Darby and his uncle were convinced they were about to make a huge fortune from their gold mine. Then tragedy struck. The gold simply disappeared. Just when their hopes were at their highest, the Darbys were crushed to reach the end of the rainbow. The proverbial pot of gold was no longer there. Greg set his pen down, mentally kicking himself. If he had actually invested the time to read the first chapter of the book, he would have already gotten it. Now, remember, they just wanted more gold. They had never studied the art of gold mining and had no true passion for the business of mining, so they didn't know what to do next except to keep digging. With their impatience and lack of knowledge, it wasn't long before they became totally frustrated and disillusioned. They had experienced instant success and lost patience when the job became more difficult. They kept digging but found no more ore. It wasn't long before their dissatisfaction got the best of them, and they decided to quit. Green paused to take a sip of water. Greg leaned forward so as not to miss a word of the story. Discouraged and defeated, Darby and his uncle sold both their mine and their equipment to a local junkman. For years, this junkman had been looking for an opportunity to break into the mining industry. He had studied mining for over a decade and had always believed that this was his destiny. The sale was completed with the exchange of a few $100s and a deed. With that, Darby and his uncle caught the next train and returned to their home in Maryland, ending their quest for gold. "That's it? That's all?" Greg asked. "They just gave up?" "Yes, they just quit. But the story doesn't end there. You see, the junkman was passionate about the idea of mining. Remember, he was just waiting for the right opportunity. He was also smarter than most people gave him credit for. With the deed in hand, he hired a mining engineer to inspect the claim, and together they discovered what is known as a fault line. The engineer explained that gold ran in long veins, and that the previous owners had simply drilled through one side of the vein and come out the other. The engineer explained that if the junk man were to go back and dig in the other direction, perpendicular to where the Darbys had made their first discovery, he would most likely tap back into the treasure. The new owner, the junk man turned gold miner, followed these simple instructions, and sure enough, he hit one of the largest pockets of ore ever uncovered, a mere 3 feet away from where the Darbys had quit mining. The junk man retrieved millions of dollars in gold from the site. He succeeded where Darby and his uncle had failed because of 2 things: his determination to fulfill his life's purpose of becoming a gold miner, and, of course, his willingness to seek expert advice. Don paused to let the message sink in. And what do you think Mr. Darby did when he heard about the success of the junk man? Greg said, "He probably just gave up on life." Well, many people would, but R.U. didn't let this failure go to waste. He learned his lesson about stopping 3 feet from gold, and went on to apply it to his work in the insurance business. Sure, he was heartbroken when he heard about the success the junk man had achieved at his personal expense, but he never forgot that the real reason he lost a fortune was because he had decided to give up too soon. He dedicated his life to never again accepting defeat. With his new never-quit attitude, Darby went on to create his own fortune in the insurance industry. He repaid his friends and family from his new fortune, and, importantly, he also started sharing his story so others could learn from his mistake. "That's a powerful story," the young visitor commented. Don added, "Before great success comes, you will surely meet with temporary defeat. When people are overtaken by these feelings, the easiest and perhaps most logical thing to do is to quit. Quitting is exactly what the majority of people do." Greg quickly wrote in his notepad, "Before great success comes, you will surely meet with temporary defeat." Green finished his thoughts by saying, "There are 3 things you want to remember after you select your path." Greg scribbled Don's words. "Select your path and then, 1. Seek the counsel of those who have expertise outside your own. 2. Never quit 3 feet from gold. 3. When you become successful, you will find others whom you can mentor. Share with them the lesson you have learned." "Remember this," Don added. "The reason most people quit is because they fail to unearth their definite life purpose. They don't have something worth fighting for. Once you discover this truth, then you will gain what Hill called stickability." Listening intently, Greg was still puzzled. All he could manage was, "Huh?" The Darbys quit because they were not committed to the outcome. They were simply chasing the dollars, the same way you were mentioning about wanting to become a millionaire. The junk man, in contrast, always knew in his heart of hearts that one day he would catch his break and become a gold miner, and so he did whatever he needed to do until that opportunity arose. In other words, he had stickability. It's the difference between being interested and being committed. Greg wrote in his notebook, "There is a difference between being interested and being committed." "Think of it this way," Green said. "Imagine going to a social event where you meet a fine-looking young lady, and you find yourself interested in her. Compare that to meeting the love of your life and getting married. So now you are committed. Eventually, troubles will arise. They always do." Greg envisioned how he had recently come home to his empty apartment. When times get tough, you may run from the situation or, as in this case, from the person you are merely interested in, whereas with a marriage or a more committed situation, you are more likely to seek a resolution and stick it out because you're dedicated to the relationship. "Boy, can I relate to that," Greg interjected. The Darbys quit at the first sign of struggle because they had no passion for the business. The junk man, on the other hand, loved his life, was committed to finding the opportunity to become a gold miner, and was eventually rewarded for sticking with his vision. Writing in his book, Greg added a new powerful message with one word in giant, bold print. To succeed, you must have stickability. Neglecting to broaden their view has kept some people doing one thing all their lives. Napoleon Hill. Chapter 4. Through the Valleys. On the flight home, Greg's mind raced like a Ferrari, speeding near the limit of its capacity on a wide-open road. Just as one topic redlined, his thoughts shifted to another one of Green's points. He realized that Buckland had sent him to meet Don Green for a very good reason. Nearly everyone he knew had given up at some point in their lives, stopping just 3 feet from achieving success. Of course, he included himself in this group of quitters, in fact, right at the top of the list. Sure, things weren't going smoothly for him, but did he really want to quit simply because things were getting complicated? He knew he didn't lack the talent he needed to succeed. He also had confidence that he could find the resources he would need. It was suddenly clear that he simply needed to find the passion, the drive, and most of all, the stickability to continue moving forward toward his own success. Part of the struggle he was now beginning to understand was that he had attempted to do everything himself. He was living by the old adage that if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. The problem with that belief was that he always ended up doing everything on his own. This philosophy was creating havoc in both his professional and personal life. The stress from trying to accomplish so much on his own left him with little time and energy for anything else. This included his girlfriend, Mia, whom he truly loved. He now understood, fully and completely, that he had not committed himself to the relationship. The way Don shared the 3 feet from gold story had really made an impression about the undeniable importance of seeking counsel from people with expertise outside your own. If Greg was going to succeed, he had to start allowing others to help him. A perfect example came to mind. He knew little about accounting and operations, yet he considered himself a genius at sales and marketing. Maybe that's a bit extreme, he thought. Lately, however, he had been spending way too much of his time on bookkeeping issues and had gotten way behind on sales calls. Business had therefore slowed down, and his finances had suffered. He had stopped working his strengths. It was obvious that he needed to enlist those who were experts in accounting and operations to assist him and to free him up so he could do what he did best. Plus, it was what he loved to do. He jotted onto his pad, "Work your strengths, hire your weaknesses." Just doing this one thing would allow him to grow his business quickly while he himself grew smarter and hopefully create more free time to do what he excelled at and enjoyed most. As soon as he deplaned, he hailed a taxicab and headed to the World Capitol building. Reading Buckland, his newfound mentor, he realized how much his attitude had already changed as a result of meeting this man. "Mr. Buckland, wow, what a great trip!" Greg's enthusiasm carried in his voice. "I understand why you sent me to meet with Don. What a champion. I cannot believe I got to sit down with the CEO of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. I learned firsthand from him the power of not quitting 3 feet from goal. Thank you." Greg took a breath. "And I love the part about seeking guidance from an outside source. I got it. I finally realized that I won't become successful if I'm a one-man show." "You're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed meeting Don," Buckland said. "Now, the big question is, what are you going to do with that information?" The protege said, "I knew you were going to ask me that. So here's the plan. On the way over here, I set up meetings with some of the best people I could get a hold of, so I can ask for their opinions on my business and career." "Well, that's a shame, because you won't get very far." "What? I thought that was why you sent me to meet with Mr. Green. I thought you'd be proud that I figured it out." "It's wonderful that you listened to him. Only I wish you would seek out counsel rather than opinions." "What's the difference?" Greg asked, furrowing his brow. "It's the difference between succeeding and not. The problem is, almost everyone listens to other people's opinions rather than seeking out good counsel." Buckland cleared his throat. "It's like this. Opinions are usually based on ignorance, or shall we say a lack of knowledge, whereas counsel is based on wisdom and experience." Greg digested the statement. Buckland continued. "Imagine going to friends or family members and sharing with them that you want to do something they have never been exposed to. Like, for instance, writing a book. They might say you were crazy, right?" Greg smiled as he imagined his friend's reaction.